Right, folks, the time has come to unleash the bounty hunter. So today I'm going to be giving my final review of the galaxy's biggest, baddest all-grain recipe kit from Brew in association with Emperor's Brewery. But that's not all. You're also going to get the thoughts of the Emperor himself, Damien, on this beer, and some of my colleagues from the Hop Edition podcast. And I'm going to be doing a little comparison between this, my version, and an original bottle of the beer Damien made himself at home over 6 years ago. So let's get into it. So here we have it. This is the Bounty Hunter, a chocolate, blueberry, vanilla and coconut Imperial porter. It's a big old beer and it's one of the most complex recipes, let alone all grain kits, that I've ever attempted. Very involved brewing process, lots of interesting stuff to get into on that front. And it's from a legit recipe from Damien of Emperor's Brewery that's been produced in association with Brew. Obviously, you can still go and buy this, so go and check it out on the links below if you're interested. It's also a very expensive kit, so do bear that in mind. But I hope that by the end of this video, you'll be seeing that it's well worth the money. And if you are interested in brewing something along the lines of an Emperor's beer, which are pretty serious in terms of Imperial stouts, this is a great kit to get you started if you're not sure how to go about doing that yourself. There were a couple of videos prior to this looking into what is actually in the kit and also obviously the brewing process itself. So do go back and check those out if you want to see more details about the beer and how I went about making it, obviously following all the instructions and details included in that recipe kit. Now, this beer has had a decent amount of time to condition and age now. It's nearly 6 months since it's been in the keg. The brewing process itself took quite a while as well, so it's a fair amount of time since the brew day. Even so, by Impy standards, it's still not exactly old, so it's still relatively fresh by 12% plus beer standards. But I thought it was important to give it a little bit of time to kind of round out the flavours and everything. That said, the tasting with Damien was quite a while ago, so it was very young at that point, and to be honest, it was tasting really decent, and quite a bit of it has been drunk since about 2 to 3 months in, I would say, was when it really started to come together. So you don't need to leave it too long before it starts to be tasting really good and really drinkable. But obviously with beers this big, if you can leave it alone for long enough to get a bit of age on it, it does tend to help with the flavour and the smoothness of it and getting everything just to balance out nicely. So let's start off looking at the beer in terms of the visuals. It's really dark, as you would expect. This is actually the glass with my logo on it, which you can't see, or I can't see it anyway. I don't know if it's picking it up on the camera because it's so dark. The head has dropped down a little bit. It was a really nice, fluffy, kind of blancmange type head on the top there initially, but it's still sticking around, so it's got good head retention, which isn't always the case for really strong beers, and it's a nice creamy sort of tan head on the top there. Yeah, it just looks like a really big, thick Imperial stout or porter, whatever you want to call it in this case. Yeah, looks good in the glass, looks like it's going to get a bit of lacing off of that head as well. So visually, looks the business. Let's get in there for some aroma and see what we get. So the main thing for me off of the nose initially is a big whack of kind of dark chocolate aroma on this. Really rich, a little bit biscuity as well. So there's definitely chocolate kind of leading there. But I think there's some of the blueberry, so there's a little bit of a, kind of a berry note there, and we're getting a bit of sweetness. Obviously that's going to be potentially from the malt, but I think we're getting a bit of that vanilla coming through as well. And I think you can pretty much get off the aroma a little bit of everything that's gone in there in terms of the big adjunct additions, because the coconut, it's difficult to sort of, I don't know really if you can describe an aroma as creamy, but there is that kind of coconut creaminess on the aroma there. Yeah, chocolate's the main thing, but I think you're definitely getting a little bit of all those other additions in there. as well. So let's give it a taste. It's really thick, decadent, loads of rich, malty, chocolatey flavour on there. But then you get this almost like a very slightly tart blueberry flavour that comes in as well. But that's at the same time as you're getting a kind of sweetness from the vanilla, creamy mouthfeel from the coconut. Again, it's all kind of there. And it's coming together beautifully in it. Now, this beer did come out in the end somewhere above 12.5%. I wasn't exactly sure on the percentage after all of the additions went in there, particularly when I was adding the kind of steeped vodka with the cacao nibs, which kind of confused the issue a bit. But at the last count, in terms of gravity, I think we were definitely north of 12.5%. It's dangerously drinkable considering it's that big a beer. And although it is thick and kind of decadent in terms of the mouthfeel and body on it, at the same time, it's not overly sweet or cloying. Yeah. It's obviously not something that you'd want to be chugging by the pint, but it's actually fairly easy drinking considering it's such a big beer and it's got such a complex mix of flavours and ingredients in there. So I love it. It's really, really good. I'm really happy with how it's come out. I think it has kind of ticked the box in terms of all those different flavour additions and adjuncts that have gone into this beer. It definitely does make me think of Emperor's beers in terms of the ones that I've had before. I think it's quite authentic in that sense. It seems like it's a good representation of those types of beers. So yeah, if you're big into Emperor style Impy stouts or porters and you want to have a go at doing one yourself, I would say this is a really good place to start because you've got the full recipe there. You know that it's a legitimate recipe with high quality ingredients in there as well. Yes, it's going to cost a bit of money, but it would cost you about the same amount of money if you're going to try and put that kind of recipe together yourself anyway. So yeah, if you're going to invest in a beer like this, why not do one that's a kind of tried and trusted recipe like this? I think that the combination of flavours in this is great. Some people might prefer it maybe without the fruit or something like that. Maybe just stick to like a kind of chocolate and coconut vanilla beer, which would be equally decent, I think. But I'm enjoying kind of all the different aspects that have gone into this. So once again, massive thank you to the guys at Brew Day for letting me test this out. Massive thank you for Damien sharing the recipe with them, and also for coming on our podcast, the Hop Edition. That episode came out quite a while ago, but if you haven't listened or watched it already, go back and check that out. And let's cut to a little bit of footage from that where you can see Damien and the other guys giving us a little bit of feedback on this beer when I sent it to them to see what they think.
Yeah,
it's a lovely beer. I've got to let's start there, shall we? It's a lovely beer. Yeah, it's got a nice body on it. You know, it's thick, but it's not too much. I mean, we're probably going to try a beer which is the thickest beer in the bloody world later, but this is just a nice drinkable Imperial stout. You're getting the blueberry on it. It's got that toasted coconut there as well. If I taste, I'm going to go back to mine now, just to remind myself what this one was like.
It's well balanced.
So it is well balanced. There's no doubt about it. Yeah.
It's high.
Yeah, just a really good, rich, thick Imperial stout. Nice fruit character, good coconut character on it as well. So no, it's a cracking beer, Rich. You've done a good job there, mate.
Good. I was a little bit nervous about that one, so thank you for the feedback on it.
It's so drinkable. It's so drinkable, Tricky. It's like
dangerously drinkable. Yeah.
Oh my god, this. Oh.
Yeah, it's only really just over 2 months kind of conditioning time. So once in the keg.
Very good. I mean, Tricky. I think if I was to go and get some blueberries and like mash them with a big spoon of like warm honey. Or like slightly caramelized honey. I think that's the kind of aroma that I'm getting. But just with a touch of roast at the back of it. But it's incredibly smooth.
You got coconut in there as well, I think, on the nose quite a bit for me. And that just pulled like the creaminess of it as well, I think, with that.
That's
just
coconut
chocolate. It's like dark chocolate and just
melted dark chocolate.
Yeah,
I'm not like the coconut doesn't punch you in the face, considering there's a kilo of it.
I think that brings a creaminess, doesn't it, to all sort of.
Yeah.
And of course, there is honey in the recipe. It's one of my. Well, I don't think it's a secret anymore. It used to be, but I tend to put honey into a lot of my imperial stouts. I think it just adds a little background note. I think it. I think it helps a little bit with body. Obviously, it provides a sugar source, but I like putting honeys into imperial stout. And, I've done a lot of collaboration brews now over the last 6 years. And people are always a bit surprised when I start throwing, kilos of honey into imperial stouts. But I think it's a really nice way to get something a little bit different.
I think it's like one of the best imperial stouts I've had to date, and I think I might I think as the night goes on I might keep going, but Tricky, this is amazing, like genuinely.
Thanks, Andy.
Did you say to date or today?
To date, so far this is one,
just today.
There's quite a way to go this evening.
Yeah, because I've had a lot of good imperial stouts, but for like even just this is homebrew, and you're just like, no, come on. This is, it's epic.
So that was awesome to get some nice feedback there from the OG Emperor himself. Many thanks again to Damien for joining us on that podcast and giving me some feedback on this beer. It was also great to get some positive feedback from the other guys on the podcast as well. Not just my opinion, pretty well received this beer has been so far for all the people that have tried it out. Hopefully that's enough evidence for you guys to believe that this is pretty decent. Last thing, I've got a little bit of footage of me trying out Damien's original beer. Now, I did actually record this quite a while ago. I had some issues with the audio, which wasn't great, so it might not sound particularly good, but I'll put some of the footage in anyway, because Damien was very kind to send me one of his bottles of the original batch of Bounty Hunter, which I was really excited about, and it was also a lot older. So this was 6 years, roughly, I think, in age, the bottle that he sent me. So it's not just a comparison between the original beer and my homebrew version of it. It's also kind of a comparison between what happens to this kind of pastry stout or porter, if you want to call it that, after a really extended period of aging. So, we'll watch a little bit of that, as much of it as I can stand the crappy audio for anyway, and then we'll wrap this one up. So this is one of Damien's original bottles from his own private stash, and I'm extremely privileged that he sent me this. I think it's, as far as I know, basically the last bottle that he had. It's really nice to see that even masters of the art started off with unlabeled bottles and, little stickers on the caps, just like many of us have probably done when we were making our own batches, at the start. This is... I think he said 6 years old or over 6 years old. It's got some proper age on it. So, I'm not expecting the two beers to be identical, because obviously this is a very well matured version of it, but it's going to be an interesting comparison. And I'm just, really excited to have the opportunity to taste the OG Bounty Hunter. So, without any more waffling, let's open it up and get it into the glass. Reassuringly, it's not exploded out of the bottle, which probably would have happened if it was a 6-year-old bottle of my first few attempts at doing impy stouts. Give it a pour. Looks good to me. So I think there is a little bit more carbonation on there. Often with dark beers like this, the yeast will eventually chew through some of the more complex sugars. I should have probably topped this other glass up. So I think there's a little bit of a difference in terms of the colour of the foam on the top. This one is a little bit lighter. But is there really much point comparing the looks of two Impy stouts. They're both completely opaque and black. So look pretty similar. Let's get into this one. Interesting. So there's that kind of aged dark beer aroma there. Definitely not as much of the chocolate on the nose straight away. I'm getting more of a sort of fruit centered aroma off of this. A little bit of a kind of almost like a sherry like note in there. Again, older beers, you will start to see a little bit of oxidation. I'm not going to say this is like oxidized beer, but there might be a bit of oxidation in there, which can actually be quite nice with darker beers that have been aged for a significant period of time. A little bit more of a kind of dark chocolate to this, so it doesn't smell as kind of sweet or creamy as my version. But I think you can kind of still get a little bit of maybe that kind of like creamy note of coconut, not so much the vanilla, I don't think. So yeah, interesting. Definitely quite a big difference in terms of aroma. Let's see what the flavor's doing. Oh, that's good. So yeah, again, I think there's a big difference. You can kind of, there's interesting, I think, like the blueberries kind of there more on this beer, whereas on my one, I think you're kind of getting more from the other additions like the coconut and the chocolate nibs and stuff, whereas this has got more of a sort of like that slightly aged kind of fruit beer character to it. It's what it has got, which is the same, is really smooth drinkability. To be honest, it's really smooth. It's not like overly sweet or cloying. Well, even more so than my beer, because it's not got that really intense kind of milk chocolate flavor to it. The mouthfeel does feel a little bit lighter. So I think there's over time this almost feels like it's, I don't know if it has attenuated down more, but yeah, there's not as much contribution there from the vanilla. Certainly seems to have kind of gone, which again, over 6 years, vanilla's a bit of a fleeting flavor. The sweetness from that, I think, is pretty much lost now for a beer of this age, which is to be expected. Yeah, for me, this is more dark fruit, a little bit of a sherry note in there, smooth, dark chocolate, not so much of the kind of, I think the coconut's kind of fleeting, if not gone completely on this one as well. Although I say that, there's maybe just a little bit of creaminess at the end on this one. Really interesting comparison, more so for the fact that it's just seeing what two beers that, you know, I'm not expecting them to be like the same anyway, but two beers brewed to the same recipe, but like 6 years difference in age. You know, really interesting kind of differences there. You kind of get a real good idea between these two of the effects of extended aging on imperial stouts or porters. This is definitely more kind of like giving me that like pastry stout sort of vibe at the moment, although not as cloying and more drinkable than a lot of commercial versions of that at the moment. This is much more like a really nice aged fruited imperial stout that's starting to develop those kind of slightly savory umami kind of like flavors in there, a little bit of that kind of sherry note to it. Yeah, don't know what else to say. They're both great. I hope that you've enjoyed me pontificating over both of these beers, and again, massive thanks to the guys at Brew Day for letting me test this beer out. Massive thank you for Damien sending me the bottle to compare, and for coming on the podcast and doing the tasting of the beers with us and everything else like that. Look out for Damien's beers wherever you can get them as well. You know, he sent us a few beers to try on the podcast. They were all amazing. I'm a massive convert to Emperor's Brewery now. Not that I wasn't before, but I've got to try some fantastic beers as part of that podcast. And yeah,
what else is there to say? I'm probably starting to get quite pissed now, so I think I need to wrap this up, finish these off, and probably curl up in a ball and go to sleep. So goodbye, everyone.
So there we go. It's always interesting to see what happens to these sorts of beers when you put them aside for a bit of time. Definitely something that I think is always worth doing. Maybe keep aside a few bottles and see if you can stash them away for a while to see what happens. With this type of beer, personally, I don't think I would want to put too much of it down for too long. Some of the, obviously the flavors you maybe lose quite a bit of over time. So for quite complex kind of dessert or pastry stouts and porters like this, I think probably you want to drink it during the period where you can still taste some of those flavors, but you might get some really nice, interesting, complex flavors from them if you put a few bottles aside just to see what happens with those after an extended period of aging. So I'm not going to be keeping a huge amount of this back, but I think I'll put a couple of bottles to the side to see what happens to these in a few years. The rest of it, though, is going to be getting drunk. So cheers, everyone. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you haven't already done so, hit the like button and subscribe as well. And tell me about your experiences brewing similar beers to this one, and if you would potentially consider having a go at this kit yourself, or maybe trying to DIY your own version off of some of the information that we got on that podcast over at the Hop Edition, which again, if you haven't watched the full version, go and check that out because it's an absolute goldmine of info from Damien if you're into brewing these kind of beers, your big stouts and porters. So go and check that out. That's it. I think I'm going to go and relax and enjoy the rest of this glass. Cheers, everyone. Bye-bye.
I'm the dude. So that's what you call me, that or his dudeness or duder or, El Duderino if you're not into the whole brevity thing.